We've all been there. You're in the workshop trying to build something awesome. Maybe it's a simple box or a fancy cabinet. You measure a board, mark your line with a pencil, and make your cut. Then you measure again just to be sure. And again. You spend more time fiddling with your tape measure and square than you do actually building. It's frustrating, right? You try to get two pieces to line up perfectly, but one is always a tiny bit off. That small gap stares back at you, a reminder that your joint isn't as tight as you wanted. It feels like you're in a constant battle for accuracy, and sometimes the tape measure wins. What if I told you there's a better way? What if a single forgotten tool could solve this headache for good? I'm not talking about some expensive digital gadget or a laser-guided system that costs a fortune. In fact, this little piece of workshop magic costs less than a couple of fancy coffees. It's an old-school solution that our grandfathers knew all about, but it somehow got lost along the way. This thing is a game changer. It helps you mark lines with crazy precision, repeat measurements instantly, and make your joinery fit together like a dream. It's sitting in dusty boxes at flea markets, just waiting for someone to rediscover its power. Imagine ditching the constant back and forth with your pencil and ruler. Think about marking out a perfect mortise and tenon joint in seconds, not minutes. This tool lets you set a measurement once and then transfer it to every part of your project with flawless consistency. No more second guessing, no more squinting at tiny lines on a ruler, and definitely no more frustrating gaps in your work. It's one of those simple ideas that is so brilliant, you'll wonder how you ever worked without it. It simplifies the complicated stuff, making your projects look more professional and your time in the shop way more fun. And the best part? You can probably find one for about $30. I know, it sounds too good to be true. We live in an age of high-tech tools, with digital readouts and battery-powered everything. How could a simple, manual tool possibly compete? Well, sometimes the old ways are the best ways. This tool doesn't need batteries, it doesn't need calibration, and it will probably outlive you and me. It relies on a basic principle that just works, every single time. It's a secret that master woodworkers have kept for generations, and now it's time to bring it back into the spotlight. So, stick with me, because I'm about to introduce you to your new favorite workshop companion. You're gonna love this. Okay, the big reveal. The mystery tool I'm talking about is the humble marking gauge. That's it. It's a simple little device, usually made of wood like rosewood or beech, with a sliding fence, called the stock, and a long beam, or stem. At the end of the stem is a tiny, sharp pin or a small cutting wheel. You slide the stock to the measurement you want, lock it in place with a thumb screw, and you're ready to go. You then run the stock along the edge of your wood, and the pin scribes a perfectly straight line, exactly parallel to the edge. It's a beautifully simple design that hasn't changed much in hundreds of years. So why did this amazing tool disappear from so many workshops? Well, a couple of things happened. First, the rise of mass production and power tools made people focus more on speed than on hand tool precision. Why scribe a perfect line when a table saw with a fence could get you close enough, fast? Second, cheap tape measures and pencils became the go-to for marking everything. People forgot that a scribed line from a marking gauge is way more accurate than a fat pencil line. A pencil line sits on top of the wood, but a scribed line creates a tiny groove that your chisel or saw can register in perfectly. It's a small detail that makes a huge difference. The good news is, you can still find these gems everywhere, and they're dirt cheap. I'm talking $20 to $40 for a really nice vintage one. Your best bet is to check out flea markets, antique stores, or online marketplaces like eBay. Look for brands like Stanley, Marples, or Diston. When you're shopping, check for a few things. Make sure the stock slides smoothly on the stem, and that the locking screw tightens down firmly. Also, check that the pin is still sharp, or that the cutting wheel isn't chipped. Don't worry if it's a little rusty or grimy. A bit of cleaning is all it usually needs. There are a few types you might see. The most common is the pin style gauge, which is great for general marking. Then there's the cutting gauge, which has a tiny blade instead of a pin. perfect for marking lines across the grain without tearing the wood fibers. My personal favorite is the wheel-style marking gauge. It uses a small, hardened steel wheel to slice a clean line. These are often made of metal and are a bit more modern, but they work on the same classic principle. Whichever one you choose, you're getting a tool that will fundamentally change your approach to accuracy. So, how does this thing actually make your life easier? Let's look at a couple of common tasks. First up, marking the width of a tenon or the depth of a mortise. With a tape measure, you'd measure and mark one side, then flip the piece over, measure and mark the other side, and hope they line up. With a marking gauge, you set the distance once. Then you scribe the line on one side, flip the board, and scribe the line on the other. Because you're referencing from the same face of the board, the lines are perfectly parallel, and the thickness is exact. It's faster, easier, and 100 times more accurate. Another huge win is transferring dimensions. Let's say you're building a cabinet and you need to mark the location for shelves inside. Instead of measuring the thickness of your shelf with a ruler and then transferring that number, you can just use a marking gauge. Set the gauge directly from the shelf board itself. Just pinch the board between the stock and the cutter. Now you have the exact thickness locked in. You can take the gauge right over to your cabinet sides and scribe the layout lines for your shelf supports. This eliminates any chance of measurement error. The tool doesn't know numbers. It only knows physical dimensions, which is way more reliable. Some people might say, but Steve, my digital calipers are super accurate, and they are, for measuring. But a marking gauge does two things at once. It measures and it marks. A modern caliper can tell you a tenon needs to be 0.752 inches thick, but it can't draw the line for you. You still have to transfer that number with a pencil. The marking gauge skips that step entirely. It records the physical dimension and scribes it directly onto the wood in one fluid motion. It's a tool of relativity. It ensures parts relate to each other perfectly, which is the whole secret to good joinery. And don't even get me started on pencil lines. A sharp pencil can give you a pretty good line, but it's still about 0.5 millimeter wide. Which side of the line do you cut on? The inside? The outside? A line from a wheel marking gauge is practically zero width. It's a surgically precise incision. When you bring your chisel up to that line to chop a mortise, the chisel tip will literally click into place inside that groove. This physical registration guide is something a pencil mark can never give you. It's this physical connection between marking and cutting that makes the marking gauge so powerful, even today. Once you get the hang of the basics, you can start using the marking gauge for all sorts of clever tricks. Need to mark a line around a curved piece? A standard ruler is useless here, but with a marking gauge, you can keep the stock pressed against the curve, and the cutter will follow along, scribing a perfect offset line all the way around. This is incredibly useful for making templates or adding decorative details to curved furniture legs. You can also use it to quickly find the center of a board. Just set the gauge to roughly half the board's width, make a mark from each side, and the center is right between those two lines. You can even make some simple mods to get more out of your gauge. One easy trick is to file the pin on a traditional gauge into a tiny knife shape. This helps it slice the wood fibers cleanly when you're marking across the grain, reducing tear out. Another great add-on is a small strip of self-adhesive measuring tape stuck onto the stem of the gauge. This allows you to set precise measurements quickly without needing a separate ruler. For about $1, you've just given your vintage tool a modern upgrade while keeping its simple, reliable function. Taking care of your marking gauge is super simple. For wooden ones, just wipe them down with a bit of paste wax every now and then. This keeps the wood protected and helps the stock slide smoothly. For the metal parts, a light coat of camellia oil or even WD-40 will prevent rust. If you have a wheel-style gauge, the cutter will eventually get dull. Don't throw it away. You can easily sharpen it by removing it and spinning it against a diamond stone. A sharp cutter makes all the difference. So a few seconds of maintenance will keep it working like new for years and years. In the end, the marking gauge is more than just a tool. It's a lesson in woodworking philosophy. It reminds us that the latest, most expensive technology isn't always the answer. Sometimes, a simple, well-made tool that has stood the test of time is all you need to elevate your craft. I challenge you to go out and find one, bring it back to your shop, clean it up, and give it a try. I promise you'll be amazed. And when you do, share your finds. Let me know what other forgotten tools you've brought back to life in your workshop. Now, get out there and make something awesome.